Welcome to Save Me From My Shelf, a literature podcast where we take classic tomes off their pedestal to make you less anxious about reading them. Our jokes come from a place of love and for a specific teaching purpose. However, if you think that making fun of great literature, and maybe some mild swearing, is offensive, this might not be the podcast for you.
Hi everyone.
Hi guys! We have a new sound this week. I wonder if anyone's going to notice. There's some audio buffs out there that are going, that's mildly improved. So we did it. We've released our inaugural episode, and I feel like we didn't really celebrate, did we, with it?
I
feel like
you might not have. I was spraying champagne around.
I was going to say, are you like smashing bottles of champagne over the podcast's hull, which is just my office?
Yeah, well, if you're wondering what that was outside. Yeah.
So in addition to a mildly new sound, a slightly improved sound, we also have a slightly new setup here. Daniel's actually going to join me in the recap, so rather than him just cracking wise while I frantically try to remember everything that happened in a book, he is going to actually join me in relaying that plot to you. So, are you saying that I broke you in the first episode and you just love plot now?
Yes. This is the twist. The plot was twist.
No, I just wasn't sure if you listened to the first episode and went, this podcast will never get off the ground if people have to listen to that much vocal fry. I need to step in. So, Daniel, what is our text today?
Othello by Mr. William Shakespeare.
So, it goes without saying, I'll say this every time, we're going to spoil this play for you. The trigger warnings, violence against women, racism. There's also quite a bit of marital strife that I found really upsetting reading this. There's a lot of domestic conflict in a lot of guises here. Yeah. And I should also note that there's a fair amount of sex stuff, so we might, work a little bit blue.
Yeah,
in our jokes.
Well,
we are playing off of the text material, so it's not, we haven't just decided to, turn this into a smut podcast. That's coming later. That's episode 12. Have you read this play before or seen it before? Because this is the first time for me. I really didn't know much of anything about it except the one famous scene toward the end.
I did it for my A-levels, actually.
So it should just go without saying as well that Daniel and I are not Shakespearean scholars. We're Victorian scholars, or 19th century anyway. So we'll do our best, but also please feel free to look up stuff on your own. We will try to caveat bits where we're a little uncertain. I'm not ashamed to admit, in a couple of parts that confused me very deeply, I had to look up the Spark Note just to make sure I was reading it right. I just thought that surely cannot be what's being said here, and it was.
Zunes. Yeah.
Yes. So it opens. Well, I don't want to get too far into that, but it opens with some old-fashioned swear words. So if you ever see Zunes, or it opens in this text with sblood, apostrophe S, and then the word blood. That's, in the old days, swearing used to mostly just be blasphemy, so what they're saying there is God's blood, or God's wounds.
Should you be bleeping out and spud?
I will do.
Yeah, thank you.
For you.
Yeah. No one's going to know what we're on about. Good. Right, so Shakespeare. I've been to Shakespeare's birthplace, so I'm pretty much an expert. I saw the bed, the second best bed and everything.
And you're like, wow, that really is second rate.
I can really imagine a slightly better bed. I didn't realise that, as per usual, Othello is not an original Shakespearean story, that it's based on a Italian story by Geraldo di Cinthio, but the plot's slightly different in that Iago fancies Desdemona instead of Desdemona, rather than it's just kind of just some kind of instigator, and he and the Moor, the unnamed Moor, kill her. So that's the big difference.
He doesn't even have a name in that version.
No, yeah, it's only Iago and Desdemona, which apparently means ill-fated soul. So. Oh,
that's interesting. Yeah, Shakespeare, very few of his plots are wholly original. Things like Romeo and Juliet, he has cribbed off of people plagiarizing who were cribbing off of people who were plagiarizing. So there's a long history of him working sort of more with, would you call it folklore rather than straight up plagiarism? Because these stories have been told so many times. Right, so should we get on then to the plot summary?
Hit me.
Okay, so I'll start out here. So it opens with these two guys in the middle of the night, sort of wandering around. Their names are Iago, who's our anti-hero. He's really almost more the protagonist than Othello is. And his buddy Rodrigo, who's the sort of... He's another himbo character, and he's just a big, rich, muscly dummy.
Yeah.
And so they both really hate this guy named Othello, and there are a few reasons for that. And the first reason is that Othello is black, which rubs them the wrong way. They're Venetian, and Othello's black and successful, so obviously they don't care for him. Secondly, Othello has secretly, they've just found out, married a white woman named Desdemona, and Rodrigo was trying to get with Desdemona, so he is livid. And the third reason is that Iago, who's also a soldier, has sort of been petitioning Othello, who's this general, this really successful general, to be put in a position of command. And instead, Othello has gone for this dweeby guy named Michael Cassio. And so I know you and I are going to cast the film version of this at the end of the podcast, but I do want to make one little casting prediction right here, because this really has shaped my reading. So...
Timothée Chalamet.
No, he doesn't need any more work.
Okay.
So I know in the text itself, they say that Michael Cassio is really handsome and smooth, but I'm actually picturing... Well, they do. They say he's really good with the ladies, he's really attractive.
Oh, smooth like... Hey.
Smooth.
I think you meant like he kind of slips over or what?
Yeah, he's just a sphere.
Yeah. A pebble.
But no, I'm picturing actually a Michael Cera type, the sort of guy who you just know would be like in the back half of a horse costume. That level of dork, because they talk about how he has no command. He's basically
Well, Iago says that. You're casting it according to Iago's preferences.
Let me have this. So Iago says that he hates Othello. You know, Othello is basically taken everything from me. All I have left is my hatred for Othello. What I'm going to do is I'm going to serve under him, buddy up to him, and ruin his life. And then he and Rodrigo just high-five for like 8 minutes. I might be editorializing slightly, but they're like, this is a great plan. We're going to destroy him. So they're like, the first way we can do this is go to Othello's secret new wife's house. Her name is Desdemona. She's a high-ranking Venetian lady. Her dad's really rich. Her dad, Brabantio. And so they go to Brabantio's house, and they just sort of scream like drunks in the night. They're like, hey, dummy, you're getting robbed. And he's like, what? What are you talking about? You've woken me up. What are you doing? And they say, okay, so this is where things get kind of crude sexually quite early. They say, you're getting robbed, quote, even now, very now, an old black ram is tupping your white ewe, and you'll have your daughter covered with a Barbary horse. So very racially charged language, just very sort of gross imagery. And he laments sort of being a father, and he tells everyone, do not trust your daughters, they will betray you.
But the funny thing is that Rodrigo is initially... Because it's like Romeo and Juliet, isn't it? They're kind of shouting up to the balcony, and Rodrigo's incredibly kind of timid, and he's all like, oh, excuse me, excuse me, I went to alert you or something. And Brabantio's like, you what? And Iago, that's where Iago comes out of all the kind of like, you know, the end of the pier material, the kind of bawdy stuff.
Yeah.
That really kind of gets Brabantio's blood boiling, doesn't it?
Didn't you had a great term for this, didn't you? You and I talked about this balcony scene, this Romeo and Juliet parallel.
The unholy balcony scene.
Yeah, I really like that.
The antithesis of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's just all dudes, none of whom fancy each other.
Yeah, kind of just shouting a lot of smut into the streets. Well, the problem is, like, when I went to see this once, this scene, everybody was just laughing all the way through this scene.
Oh no! Oh well, because this is actually meant to be vaguely funny.
Well, yeah, I mean it's offensive, but Iago is also like funny, and this guy was like a funny performer.
Yeah.
Playing Iago, but that just set the wrong tone for the rest of the tragedy, and that's.
But his tragedies often start out really funny, and then they get really dark.
Well, that's why a lot of people didn't like Shakespeare, wasn't it? A lot of kind of foreign readers. Like,
yes.
Voltaire trashed him for like, why are you putting a joke in the? Why do you keep putting jokes in the tragedy? What next happens is that we've had the whole balcony episode. They all, Brabantio takes his case to the Duke, and Brabantio's like, you know, this guy's been bewitching my daughter, you know, he kind of uses all sort of, you know, thou hast enchanted her, he kind of confronts Othello and says that.
So, wait, so, do you think that this is a pun, or is this just my modern understanding of it? So they accuse Othello of using witchcraft. Are they literally accusing him of black magic?
Well, I mean, I think that was an ambiguity, wasn't there? Or that was the thing that Shakespeare was playing on, that there was a lot of connotations about like the devil being black, like literally, and stuff like that. So I think you might be right. I think that is I think the basis for Brabantio's accusation is partly racial.
But it's like, it's not a visual pun, it's a sort of, it's a different sort of conceptual
kind of
pun. And I just thought, is that tacky, or is that, you know?
The Doge gets Desdemona in. Othello and Desdemona are kind of like, no, this is the real deal, you know. And she's all like, Dad, I'm sorry, but, you know, I decided to have a secret wedding. I didn't invite you. Couldn't afford that many, you know, salmon starters or whatever. I don't quite know why it was a secret marriage. I suppose because she knew that people would be funny about it.
She knew that people would be funny about it, but also there's that weird bit where they find out that Othello is her dad's friend. So Othello talks a little bit about how he won over Desdemona, and he does this thing, right, where he says, I thought this was so funny, where he's like, Duke, my liege, you know, I'm not much of a talker, which is the oldest trick in the book. But
I'm just a simple country Venetian general.
Okay,
I knew you were going to do it, that's why I said it.
Oh, Daniel, undercutting me at every turn. Yeah, I wrote, I'm just a humble country general.
Yeah.
Damn it. But he says that he's not much of a talker, but then he tells everyone...
Does this big soliloquy.
He does a big soliloquy and tells
about what a great speaker he is. You know, Othello, he's got the gift of the gab, to say the very least, and that was the only magic, the only witchcraft he used on Desdemona. He told his kind of exotic tales of cannibals and things, didn't he?
So, are you saying that plot has its uses after all? It's a hell of an aphrodisiac, that's at least what we're learning here.
Evidently, yeah. So, I mean, Brabantio is not especially pleased, and...
yeah, who wouldn't love their daughter marrying their weird middle-aged friend?
Well, but the Doge is kind of all up for it and says, well, he's like, oh, my daughter would love that too, or something, doesn't he? And then he it's funny that he speaks in kind of this slightly hackneyed verse when he's talking about the romance, and then he like says, well, the real reason we're all here is because of policy, and he goes back into prose then, and he's like, the Turks are invading Cyprus, which is a Venetian colony, and we need you, Othello, to go and, show them what for. So we kind of have this rapid kind of switch from kind of romantic issues to matters of state, which is I thought it was quite a funny bit.
Well, that's one of my notes here. It's not so much even necessarily romantic issues and matters of state, but the very clear overlap or the sort of muddying of waters between love and war, and they both are sort of funneled in.
And of course, there's the key scene, the key line is Brabantio, isn't it, when he goes, "Look to her more, if thou hast eyes to see. She has deceived that her father, and may thee," and that's kind of the first kind of...
Yeah, thanks, Dad. I was sort of interested here, because there's the bit where the Duke is like, okay, Othello, you have to go to war. I don't have time for all this domestic whatever. And he's like, well, can I please bring my wife with me to war? And he's like, well, I don't really normally allow that. And he's like, no, you don't get it. I love her for her mind. I'm too old to be sexual. And I just thought that, I mean, we should come back to this a bit in the analysis section at the end, but I thought that was really interesting, especially because I think it's at the end of this bit as well, Iago says there's a rumor that Othello slept with Iago's wife.
Yeah.
Amelia.
Yeah.
So there's a whole sort of like, is Othello sexual or not? And that's conflated with a lot of issues of race.
Well, I was going to, that's because in the Elizabethan plays, generally, quote unquote, Moors were associated with sort of lustfulness or whatever, weren't they? And so Shakespeare's deliberately undercutting these sort of stereotypes in a kind of like, aha, but no. It makes me think, in Our Mutual Friend, where Dickens was like, sorry, Jews, about Fagin. Here's a really, really lovely, like, improbably lovely Jewish guy to kind of counter it. There's this sort of slightly tacky, aha, but you see, he doesn't,
I'm not racist, look how well...
I have many black generals. But, exactly, that's the final bit though, isn't it? Iago has this big soliloquy where he kind of outlines his evil plan in the... slightly silly Kenneth Branagh version. There's all kind of thunder and lightning going off at this point.
Oh, you're kidding.
No. And Iago's all kind of, got his fingers together in a kind of Mr. Burns type way. I'm going to make them fall out, Othello and Desdemona. That's the kind of big...
Yeah.
He reveals what his plan is going to be, and
Yeah, so he's gonna...
Let's see how it turns out.
So the next bit is sort of, long story short, we open in Cyprus. Everyone has landed there, so the entire cast more or less has completely relocated. And we open, what I thought was really interesting, the Turkish fleet has already been defeated, so we don't even actually see the war. And they didn't even properly fight, so I think it's revealed that the whole other army has been destroyed in a storm.
Yeah.
And so it's just really interesting. So now you have all these people here. I don't know if they got all their bloodlust up and nowhere to sort of vent it, or I'm not sure if there's some sort of colonialist reading of, well, we're further away from home and things get kind of weird there.
There's a bit of a sort of Wild West vibe, isn't there, once they get to Cyprus?
So we meet Cassio, who's revealed to actually just be a really nice guy. He's completely loyal to Othello, if a bit of a dweeb. And so when Desdemona lands, Cassio's really polite to her, as you would be to your boss's wife. And that feeds perfectly into Iago's plan to convince Othello that Desdemona and Cassio are having an affair. So part of Iago's plan is also to get Rodrigo to be his little pawn, and he knows that Rodrigo is in love with Desdemona. And so he says, oh, Desdemona and Othello, they've only been married for, I guess, a few weeks at this point. And he says she's gotten sick of Othello already and gotten the hots for Cassio and is DTF. And so you should definitely, are you looking at me quizzically? You didn't,
No.
Do you know what? Oh, I'm sorry, is that too rude?
No, I don't know what it means.
It means, you should all Google that on Urban Dictionary. It's down to fornicate.
Right, okay, something like that.
Yes. So Iago tells Rodrigo, you should really provoke Cassio into a fight and get him fired. And Rodrigo, who's instantly jealous that he wasn't Desdemona's backup plan, sort of sees the red mist descend. And one thing that gets revealed in this whole early section introducing Cassio is that we're told he cannot hold his drink. So again, I'm picturing Michael Cera at his first frat party getting rip-roaring drunk on 1.5 wine coolers. And, Iago hears this little tidbit and he just goes, interesting. So that night, Othello and Desdemona go off to have sex for what's presumably the first time. I think that's alluded to, even though they might have been married for days or weeks at this point. We're not really sure. And there's a party to sort of celebrate the sinking of the Turkish fleet, even though I don't think these guys really did anything. They didn't really have much of a hand in that. But so Othello tells Cassio, you're my second in command. You need to just keep everything chill. It's, for all intents and purposes, my wedding night. And so Iago instantly peer pressures Cassio into drinking. He loses his damn fool mind and gets into a fight with Rodrigo, just as Iago had hoped. So we have people drinking too much, we got a fight erupting, we have people very conspicuously fornicating in another room. This party sounds terrible to me. I would not want to be anywhere near this.
Yeah, no one's playing Ludo or anything.
Exactly, yeah. I think you and I are much more a quiet party.
Othello, they could be playing Othello,
the board game.
Yeah, the excellent board game.
There's a side room where the tabletop games are happening.
Yeah.
And so Othello storms back in, like, y'all are interrupting my fornication. What is happening? They tell him that Cassio and Rodrigo are getting into a fist fight or what have you. And Othello serves some real dad energy here, where he's like, Cassio, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. You're fired. And Cassio's full of, like, all this horrible self-loathing afterward. He goes on this whole long diatribe about how drinking is man's downfall, blah, blah, blah. And Iago comforts him by saying, it would be a great idea and help you get your job back. You should cozy up to Desdemona, Othello's new beloved wife, get her to be your best friend, get real cozy with her, in fact, and Othello will listen to whatever she says, she'll help you get your job back. And he even Iago also says that he's going to make his own wife, who's sort of Desdemona's kind of lady-in-waiting, to pressure Desdemona to take Cassio's side.
As Iago predicted, Cassio starts hanging around Desdemona, and very quickly Othello sees them together, at which Cassio kind of slinks off.
As you would do when you've just been fired by a guy.
In disgrace. Iago really starts to kind of, strongly suggest that Desdemona is unfaithful to Othello. We get all of this sort of green-eyed monster stuff as well. There's a lot of kind of,
That's the first instance of that phrase ever being used.
Yeah,
jealousy is a green-eyed monster. So if you're ever wondering where that phrase came from, it's here, friend.
Yeah, or he might have nicked it off someone else, but
What? Shakespeare nicked things off of people?
I think so, yeah. Jealous people. He does that. It's an apotheosis, isn't it? I was thinking in the old rhetorical thing that Iago's all kind of like, I'm not going to say that Desdemona's not unfaithful because there's not enough evidence. But, if I were to, he does a lot of that sort of stuff, doesn't he? And Othello kind of...
Well, that's why he's so, he's very good at suggesting these things because he leads Othello right up to the conclusion and then makes Othello take that final step.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And so he thinks it's his idea and something that he has discovered himself rather than Othello leading him all but to the final step.
Iago.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Meanwhile, Othello drops a hanky.
You mean Desdemona?
Meanwhile, Desdemona drops a hanky. We've all been there, haven't we? A tournament or whatever. For your favourite knight.
Well, when I'm trying to get men to court me in the street and I just drop a handkerchief over and over and over again to see how many blokes will pick it up.
Magicians get in people's pockets.
Yes.
Exactly, yeah. So Desdemona drops a hanky. Turns out it's quite a special hanky there, that's the problem. And Emilia, Iago's wife, picks it up and is like, well, my husband's been asking me to get this hanky for years. Not sure why, but maybe this will get me back in his good books because he seems to have some idea that Othello and me are having an affair. So Emilia gives it to Iago, and Iago in turn deposits it in Cassio's lodgings.
I imagine if you were seeing this for the first time and you had no idea what was going on in this play, you're like, what is this about a handkerchief? This is, what is happening around this? But they don't explain it that much at first. You just know that there is something important happening over a really, really trivial thing.
By the end, Othello is a nervous wreck, isn't he? And Iago he's like, you're the only one I can trust, Iago. And we have this kind of sort of knightly kind of perverse kind of corrupted version of a sort of knightly oath of loyalty. And
well, can we talk a little bit about one of the things that Iago says to Othello? Because I have some thoughts about it in this particular scene. And that's the fact that he's like, hey, Othello, Cassio and I shared a bed the other night, which...
That's a good bit.
Queer reading, hooray! And so Iago's like, okay, Cassio and I were in bed together the other night, and I know that that's probably just logistics of soldierly life.
I lay with him, though. I think that's deliberately ambiguous, right?
Yes.
That's the old way of saying
we
slept. It's a similar euphemism to fornicating. Yeah.
But Iago says, so Cassio and I were sleeping in bed, and he spoke in his sleep in perfect sentences, and he said that he's in love with Desdemona, and they're sleeping together.
Iambic pentameter.
Yeah, and then also he started kissing me real hard, and then I was like, this is the bit where I had to look up in Spark Notes. Does Iago tell Othello? And then Cassio jumped on top of me and started, humping him a little bit. This is like...
What is the line?
I don't have it.
Great.
But I don't
Stop
have
everything, let me get it. No, carry on.
But this is like a child making up a lie, and Othello just swallows it wholesale. He's just yep, wow, that sounds like total proof. And I'm just reading this going, this cannot actually be what I'm reading. I really did have to double check this.
Laid his leg over my thigh, and sighed and kissed and then cried, cursed fate that gave thee to them all.
So Othello, who's now super suspicious and starting to go mad, confronts Desdemona saying, hey, can I borrow a hanky? That really specific used hanky my mother had? It's his mother's hanky, her special
Love
used hanky that he gave to Desdemona as a token of his love. And poor Desdemona, who has no idea of all these machinations and genuinely did just lose it, is like, oh no, I've lost it. And Othello goes from 0 to 60 and goes, oh, you lost it, huh? Well, sucks to be you. Because a witch sewed it back in the day and said that any woman who owned this hanky and then lost it was a dirty tramp, which is an oddly specific linen-based curse. And then they get into a huge fight, and it's really awful. And then meanwhile, Cassio goes to see his mistress, who is the courtesan Bianca, and he says, hey, I found this really pretty handkerchief in my room.
Great hanky.
Yeah, I just found this really amazing hanky in my room, and I'm not going to question how it got there, but do you think...
Because you wouldn't.
Yeah, because you wouldn't, yeah.
It's got strawberries on it, hasn't it?
But he says, do you think you could copy the pattern and sew a new one for me? And the thing is, like, right, this is why I cast him in my head as Michael Cera, because I don't want to kink shame anyone, but most men do not go to sex workers to hire them to carry out a little light embroidery. So while Bianca and Cassio are having this whole weird, long, drawn-out exchange about this hanky...
It's hard to play, isn't it? It takes up half the play, the hanky toy.
Yeah. It takes forever. And again, this is just playing so weirdly perfectly into Iago's hands, where I'm like, why would you go to your beautiful courtesan mistress in the street to talk about this, where it doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, but it doesn't. And so Othello and Iago are in the street, and they see them having this whole discussion, and they see Cassio waving around this handkerchief, and Othello's like, it's my mom's hanky, my mom and my wife's hanky. And he says...
Different people.
So Othello says to Iago, I wish I could kill him for 9 years, which is the most hilarious and arbitrary length of time.
Yeah, not a full decade.
No, that's too much, Daniel. Yeah. That's too much. But 9 years.
I've got things to do.
Exactly. And Iago responds with, no. You go kill your wife. Like, that's a totally normal thing to suggest. I'll go kill Cassio, because we're such great buds. I'll really take a hit for the team. Don't you worry about it. And so he finds Desdemona. They get into another really horrible fight. Like, he says some of the meanest stuff in the world to her. And then Rodrigo, there's this whole subplot that we're not going to cover here, where Iago's been sort of Ponzi scheming Rodrigo to sort of get,
Yes.
He's managed to convince him to give him his whole fortune.
Thus do I always make fools my purse.
Yes, he's like, now convert your money into jewels, now give me the jewels, and now hide the jewels here. Like, there's a whole, jewel subplot that I honestly...
He is a real wrong one, isn't he, Iago?
Iago, are you just figuring that out now?
Yeah, I don't really care about all the manipulation stuff, but when he's taking some rich guy's money, then I'm upset.
So, Rodrigo's just starting to figure out that...
But you said that I'd be married to Desdemona by now.
I like that when you do a stupid accent, you do an American one. Admittedly, it's not mine, but that's revealing a whole...
boss, So
he's starting to figure out that Iago might just be using him, and Iago manages to wiggle out of that. He's sort of the Teflon Don of his day, and he even manages to convince Rodrigo to kill Cassio, the thing that Iago just promised Othello that he would do so he wouldn't get his hands dirty. I was thinking, buddy, there's so many handkerchiefs flying around this place. Get your hands dirty. They'll be clean in no time. It's fine. That was a linen-based joke that didn't work. You're just staring at me with blank eyes.
I think there aren't that many hankies around. I mean, we've not had the hanky lineup scene yet, have we, where Othello has to identify, there's like 5 hankies, and Othello's like, yeah, it's number 3. 'Twas number 3.
Good, just double
with the
checking.
strawberries on it.
Sorry, I'm very paranoid about this. About the recording. Okay.
The hanky lineup is the best joke I've ever made or will make. You trashed it. A man's wealth and money are trash, but his hanky joke lasts forever.
This is getting cut.
This is all perfect. I was going to say there's that funny bit where Emilia, or sort of funny bit, where Emilia and Desdemona have a little chat during this kind of episode in the play, and Emilia's like, oh men, they're all but stomachs and we all but food. They eat us hungrily, and when they are full, they belch us.
Yeah, that's this play is, as I said, very crude, isn't it? It's very bodily focused and things like that.
So we have this kind of eve of the denouement kind of scene, don't we, where Desdemona is preparing to go to bed with Othello.
Which I find crazy, given that they've just had 2 huge fights in a row, and she still assumes that they're going to have sex after this. Like, negging really does work. Maybe that's the moral of the play.
Yeah, he should really be on the sofa, shouldn't he? I think. So yeah, she and Emilia have a kind of melancholy chat in the way that they have been already, and Desdemona talks about her mother's servant called Barbary. So I was kind of wondering if she might be. It's the implication that she's from Africa as well.
Yeah.
And she was also spurned by her partner and kind of had devised this song called the Willow Song that Desdemona now sings about sort of thwarted love or kind of spurned love.
So that to me, that struck me as an example of an epithalamium. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, is that a kind of pre-conjugal song? In this case, a sort of bitter version.
It's typically a song sung about or before a wedding, and often, to some extent, a wedding night. That's my understanding of it anyway. But yeah, you're right, this is a dark version of that.
Yeah, it's a sad bit, isn't it? Having bit.
Well, there's a lot of talk there about them getting the marriage linen and putting it on the bed, and Desdemona says that even if she dies before her time, she wants to be buried in her marriage sheets as a funeral shroud. And I'm just like, is this play sponsored by Linen? Linen for all of your estrangement needs.
That's
Linen.
Thomas Rhymer, the 17th century literary critic, late 17th century, said when he saw Othello, he was like, is the moral of the story, look after your linen? So I think you might be right.
So while this is all happening, while Desdemona and Emilia are having their sort of weird introspective about linen, Rodrigo and Iago are out hunting for Cassio, and they do it in the dark. Rodrigo jumps Cassio. He's wearing some surprise armor that they weren't anticipating, so he does get hurt quite badly, but not killed, as Iago had intended. And Rodrigo, who's the perpetual patsy, does get stabbed in return.
Doesn't Iago give him a stab as well? He kind of goes, and then like kind of...
To tie up loose ends and things,
Well, because there's that great bit where Iago's like, as far as I'm concerned, either of them could die. I'm sitting pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
He's so evil, isn't he? Twiddling his little moustache.
So then we cut back to the big scene in the play, right? This is the most famous scene. So Othello, we cut back to his bedroom with Desdemona. He walks in, sees her sleeping, and he sort of fully rationalizes to himself how important and noble it is that he kills her. And he also says, he's like, if she is this beautiful while she's sleeping, think about how hot she's gonna be in death. And maybe I'll just have a little bit of sex with her after, because Jesus of Nazareth, this guy.
What's the line where he says that?
Look it up in the book, man.
Okay. Oh, I will kill thee and love thee after.
Yeah, I will kill thee and love thee after, you absolute creep. Okay.
I thought you might just be like, I thought it was just like that.
Well, see, the thing is,
I'll
right?
hold you in esteem after. I thought it was like that.
I don't think so, right? So, okay. Desdemona wakes up, sees her husband leering at her from the doorway, and she's like...
Hello, you.
Oh, I thought the implication was sex now?
Yeah. Okay.
And his response is, have you said your prayers? And she says, yeah. And he's like, great, my last gift to you is for you to get absolved for your sins before I kill you. So if you have any more sins to confess or prayers to make, smoke them if you got them. And then does he strangle her or smother her? That seemed slightly unclear to me. He does something anyway.
So right at this moment, Iago's pretty much on top of the world, isn't he? Cassio's been run through, Rodrigo's dead.
And he has Rodrigo's money.
He has Rodrigo's dosh. Desdemona's been killed. Then Emilia turns up in Othello's bedchamber and is kind of a bit like, oh dear. She's pretty horrified. All the big names turn up. Lodovico and Gratiano, and Iago's also there. And
they arrest Othello.
Yeah, they arrest Othello. Then we have this bit where Emilia starts to kind of reveal aspects of Iago's plot and how she took the hanky and things, and she starts to kind of horrified realizes that she's been an accessory of Iago's scheme, and Iago kind of flips and it's kind of suddenly reveals himself as this kind of psychotic, and everyone kind of realizes what a bastard he is. And so she
narked basically on her husband.
Well, it's that great bit where she says "my husband" 3 times, and they just they carry on, keep talking. She just keeps going "my husband," and you can tell that she's kind of working it out and like, oh my, what have I done?
That's a great moment for an actress.
Disturbing.
Yeah. Sorry, I said narked, and I actually meant she grossed, as you would say.
You've been grossing. Yeah. It's more Cockney, isn't it? But
Yeah, that's what you are, aren't you? That's what I
yes.
hear when you talk.
Yes, and yeah, I forgot that. Meanwhile, kind of Othello turns out he's got a weapon on him. He runs Iago through, but Iago survives, and then does his kind of weird bit where he talks about seeing how he saw a Venetian attacked in the Levant by a Turk, and and Othello says, "I smote him thus," and stabs himself in the stabs himself and dies, and everyone's kind of like, well, what a dreadful, oh bloody period, they say, don't they? What a dreadful nightmare. And
Yeah,
that's the end.
We were having such a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, this play is a stone cold bummer. Yeah, Othello's like 2 out of 10, would not smother wife again, offs himself.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting though is that they arrest Othello. Othello manages to stab himself. They arrest Iago when Emilia tattles on him, basically. Not tattles, that sounds like she's very right to tell them what she's done. But Iago stops speaking. He kind of disappears. Like, they arrest him. He's stabbed but will probably survive. But he just kind of disappears from the play that he's actually the lead in. Like, he Irish goodbyes his own
Yes.
play.
Yeah.
And then that's the end, and most people are dead. And he kills Emilia. Like, let's not forget that.
Of course, sorry. Yeah.
He actually stabs his wife, and I find this a little silly in that he could just call her a liar and say she was in cahoots with Desdemona. Well, the end. So, I assumed with a Shakespeare tragedy that I was gonna just plumb the foulest depths of the human condition, and in that, I think I was successful. I honestly didn't know what to make of this play. What is the moral? What is the point? It was very good, but it was very disturbing.
Yeah, it's a pretty misanthropic.
And for why?
Word. Yeah, a bloody farce, as
Yes.
Reimer said. Yeah.
So, do you want to cast this now? Should we cast this play just by way of a lark?
Sure.
No, okay, so I have a cast that's really unorthodox. But I want to see if it would work. So, okay, so for Othello, we need a black man who plays a believable warrior, who also seems like a really nice guy, but somebody who maybe has just the tiniest hint of naivete about him.
Yeah.
He needs to be a warrior, but also believably gullible. I would love to see The Rock in this role. I would love to see The Rock's Othello.
Oh, really?
As Iago. Real unconventional choice, but I'm thinking if you're going to cast Iago, you need somebody who could actively hoodwink everyone. Who's the nicest seeming guy we all know? I would love to see Michael J. Fox as Iago. Just this sweet little pipsqueak. Like, you would believe every word out of his mouth.
I thought you were going to say that guy from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Rick Moranis.
Yeah.
I thought about him.
Yeah.
But you need a little bit more charisma. You need a little more pizzazz in your Iago.
Right.
I mean, I'll take a Rick Moranis.
He's
as
more
Iago.
Cassio, or your interpretation of Cassio, maybe. No wonder the Venetians lost the empire with Moranis and Fox on their side.
And Desdemona, I was thinking we need somebody who's real wide-eyed. I was thinking an Anne Hathaway circa 2010. You know, just somebody who's a little bit of, comes across as maybe a little dopey,
Right.
little sweetheart, doesn't think about things that hard.
No. Yeah.
You were so tapped out of this conversation. Daniel does not give two shits.
I don't really think about casting. Obviously, got to have James Stewart as Cassio.
Oh, you're doing James Stewart from when in his career? Are we talking 30s
I
James
think we
Stewart?
have
When he's like young and a cowboy.
1930s James Stewart can be Desdemona. 1950s when he was in
Rear Window.
Rear Window. No, not Rear Window. I don't want that one. I want the Vertigo one.
Oh, sorry.
That's Cassio.
God, we're splitting hairs here. Okay, go on.
I want a one-man show, pretty much, is what I'm saying. The James Stewart one-man.
And you want him from Fievel Goes West as Othello when he's all old and tired.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, very good. And a talking cat or something, isn't he?
He's
Or
a talking dog.
Talking dog, right, okay.
But you don't have a James Stewart that could play Iago.
No, I think he wouldn't be in it at all. We'd excise all of his lines from it. No, that's the thing people do. They assure you that it's quite...
That is the worst production
Iago
we've ever heard.
it's about madness. Iago's not even in it. It's Othello. Iago's like Othello's little kind of crazy thoughts.
Folks, we've either just witnessed genius or madness in Daniel's casting of this. Should we get to a bit of the analysis bit? Because one of the questions I have is, genuinely, what is the moral of this? What are we meant to take away? At least with other things, at least with Macbeth, it's beware of ambition. At least with Hamlet, it's beware of inertia.
Don't trust people, it seems.
But there are people in this that you clearly should trust and don't.
Trust some people, not others. I think. How are you going to work that out?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem, though, because Iago's the real problem with the play, isn't he? In the sense that we know that he and Othello have worked together for years. He kind of makes allusions to it all the time, and suddenly he just it's like, I hate them, or yeah, sure, the more's been having sex with my wife, that's probably why I hate him, or he didn't promote me. Like, there's no, what's it, Coleridge says something about motiveless malignancy. He's just kind of, he hunts for kind of something to legitimize his crazy actions. And if you've got somebody like that in your life who is capable of turning anyone to the opposite opinion, you're not really, you're in trouble, boyo. So that seems to be the message, that just avoid the incredibly lucky sociopaths in the world.
Or the message is, mind your linen and hold your liquor.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a play without a moral. Maybe it's not about necessarily the moral, it's about more nuanced patterns. It's about a discussion of madness, it's a discussion of trust, it's a discussion of misanthropy and misogyny and racism.
Well, that's what I was going to say, that's the problem. I think that's why some people consider it a racist play, that if you can't find a moral in Othello's individual character, you start to wonder if it's about, well, they're all like that, aren't they? You know, you could see why people would accuse the characterization of Othello as, if initially sympathetic, then ultimately bigoted, in the sense that there's no real reason for why he should necessarily have to be a more, apart from the fact that he needs to be an outsider to arouse some controversy in marrying Desdemona. Then you're like, well, why is it that he is so easily convinced, and why is, as Iago himself says, these Moors are quick to, change their mind. Then he changes their mind. He proves his own racism. But you're kind of like, well, what's going on there? Is Shakespeare a racist?
Well, I mean, that's the question I wanted to ask you, and this is a question that Daniel and I are no way going to be able to answer here. But I mean, is this a racist play? And I think the answer is yes and no, because it's a very mixed, very nuanced play, and there is no one or right answer in English literature. You can certainly find evidence for extreme racism in this on the part of Shakespeare, not on the part of just characters that even Shakespeare is outing as racists. But then also on the flip side, you could say, actually no, especially given the time, this is a hugely beneficial play. This is whatever.
I suppose in the most general sense, racism is about generalization, isn't it? And
this feels a little too nuanced to be
exactly. But they talk about generalization all the way through, don't they?
Yeah.
They're there's all the stuff about reputation, how are people going to see me as an individual, and how. But by extension, Cassio and Iago talk about reputation all the way through, and Iago has a lot of different opinions on it. So I think that's part of the point, isn't it? That it's about playing off generalizations against particularities and the reputations of each. And I think maybe Shakespeare is exploring those relationships. The relationship between prejudiced generalizations versus individual knowledge of another person.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the issue of storytelling in this, because Shakespeare is ultimately telling a story from stories that he has heard and been intrigued by. But also we have Othello tells stories to win Desdemona's heart. Iago tells stories to everyone, including us, constantly. Amelia, Iago's wife, he's always like, shut up, you talk too much. And people are like, she never talks, what are you on about? And then Iago not speaking at the end. So there's something here, some argument here about stories being told and people, telling or not telling. Desdemona's brought in before the Duke to tell her own story about how she fell in love, because Othello was like, I don't want to speak for my wife, let her tell her own experience, which is a great bit. Yeah,
the power of speech to cultivate the love between Othello and Desdemona, but also the power of it to kind of
undo everything.
Yeah, and break it apart. Yeah,
maybe that's the moral: is that the power of storytelling is a big one.
Yeah.
Plot is important.
The pen's mightier than the sword.
Yeah.
I was thinking the other big thing in this is madness, which kind of also plays into the idea of rhetoric. That they talk a lot about madness as a kind of autonomous thing, don't they? So they talk about the green-eyed monster. Later on, Amelia also talks about jealousy being a monster that kind of is autonomous from the person that it kind of preys upon. You know, like how paranoia meant beside the mind, like it was another mind that you had.
That's
that was
cool.
kind of bothering you.
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
That's what it literally means. Like, we get the sense same here with jealousy. The other thing is weird that Iago's obviously mad, isn't he, as well? Like, this like, oh, yeah, Othello's been with my wife. There's never... Where does that come from? Like, Iago has his... There's even a bit where Amelia says, you know, there's some squire has told Iago that I've been at it with Othello. So Iago has his own Iago. So it kind of goes on ad infinitum.
Especially because if we're looking at sort of positions of power, so Othello, who's a general, has this lower ranking man, Iago, telling him crap, and Iago has this much lower ranking, a squire's a boy, telling him this crap. Then that boy probably has some toddler being like...
Exactly, yeah, it's going on forever and ever.
Yeah.
That's the same bit with Othello. Like, Othello's this exotic character, and but then he gets with Desdemona for talking about even more exotic people. Like, you know, you think I'm exciting, you should see these guys with heads inside their stomachs. There's a sense of, like, relativism throughout the play. Everything...
Like, it always knocks
reverberates
back
on forever.
another... It's your favorite phrase of all time, the mise en abîme.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Daniel introduced me to that phrase, and I love using it now.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that, but...
It means like when you put two mirrors back to back and you can see forever into them.
Or when on, like, a cornflakes box, there's, like, a picture of somebody with a cornflakes box with that same picture inside it, and it goes on forever. I think that's the Drost effect, isn't it? It's common in branding, but
I'm trying so hard not to laugh through that.
Why? That's a real thing.
So the advice I'm going to give this week is that if you are assigned a Shakespearean text to read and you feel overwhelmed, because I certainly felt overwhelmed reading this, watch a production of it first and then go back and deal with the language. And this is, I think, especially true for the comedies, but it's true for all Shakespeare, because there are a lot of in-jokes that you might not necessarily get, and Shakespeare doesn't really give anything by way of stage directions, so the most you're going to get is this character enters, says some lines, this character exits. You're missing all of the sort of subtleties of what happens when they're saying the lines that modern playwrights put in. So watch a production of it, you know, like quite a mainstream production, and then go back and deal with the actual language, because you're going to come away with a lot of like, oh, that's the context, and these are the relationships, and that was a joke I didn't get, because it had to have some sort of physical action that went along with it, that made it a visual pun or whatever. And I think that's really helpful.
Also, like, I mean, I don't want to sound like a Philistine, right, but some of the plays like Hamlet are so long, most productions these days tend to cut bits, and I think that's a judicious cut from time to time is not
a bad thing.
Yeah, not a bad thing, and you just got to immerse yourself in it as well. I think you just got to be like...
once again, Daniel's advice is just muscle through it.
Yeah, I really do think that does help, yeah.
So, what is the clue to the next episode? We have a text picked out. So my clue is that it's the world's most famous, quote-unquote, stuffy Victorian novel, which it's really not stuffy, to feature a scene of straight-up necrophilia.
I was just going to say, you've had the Moor of Venice. Prepare yourself for more Moors.
Well, that's giving it away. So Daniel, do we have a better sign-off this time than we did last?
Fare thee well, listener. Something like that.
That's terrible. I don't know, we don't have a good catchphrase yet.
Oh, that was great fun. Yeah, I enjoyed that. Bye. The end.
Bye!
Thanks for listening to Save Me From My Shelf. Our music is The Overture to Don Giovanni by Mozart, and cover art is by Catherine Wu. Our thanks to Aston University's Centre for Critical Inquiry into Society and Culture for funding the startup of this podcast. Contact us at savemefrommyshelf@gmail.com or at smfms_podcast on Twitter. And do not, I'm going to remind you, do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Do not forget. Thank you.